back to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about the Series 2 story, The Day of the Clown, written by Phil Ford and directed by none other than Michael McCranaghan, the director of the 7th Doctor story, Battlefield. He directed a Sarah Jane adventure, making him one of only 2 directors to ever direct for both the classic series and the revived series. So that is really cool. He never touched Doctor Who, new series Doctor Who, but he did 2 episodes of the Sarah Jane Adventures, which we'll talk about his next week in the next vlog video. This story is notable for many reasons, not excluding Michael McCranaghan's work on this, but it also introduces the character of Rani, played by none other than Anjali Mahindra. She is the replacement character for Yasmin Page's Maria character, who left after doing a series in 1 story in the last episode that we talked about, the Last Suntara. And Anjali Mahindra would play Rani for the rest of the series, if I recall. I haven't actually seen much stories after this point. This is actually the first time I've ever watched a story. But from what I can gather, she stays on to the final episode of the Sarah Jane Adventures. But also noteworthy is that the villain of this story, Old Bill the Clown, is played by none other than Bradley Walsh. Graham from the Series 13 season, Series 11 and Series 12. That is just so cool. I love it when it's a nice little bit of trivia when you have an actor that has already been in Doctor Who, has like a much bigger part, like Colin Baker before him, and Peter Capaldi appeared in the 10th Doctor story, The Fires of Pompeii. So it's really cool like that. So this is his first actual role in the Doctor Who universe. Pretty cool stuff. So yeah, we introduce a new companion. We have a very high-profile actor who would later become a much bigger part in Doctor Who, playing the villain. And we also have a classic Doctor Who director return to the series. So there's a lot of hype personally for me to get into this story. So does it deliver? Does this story succeed in bringing us a story which all of this great talent has been put into? Or does it kind of flop? I will state, however, that this is a very popular story. A lot of people really enjoy this. Some even consider it their favourite their favourite story, should I say, from the Sarah Jane Adventures, or at least from Series 2, anyway. There's not really much noteworthy. Actually, I tell a lot. I'm looking at the back, I was like, oh wait, I know that one, I know that one, I know that one, I know that one, I know that one. So, it's a pretty remarkable series, Series 2. I think it's a bit more critically praised than the previous series, from what I can gather. Again, I haven't watched, I've only, at this moment of recording this, I've only watched 3 stories, because of one of the last episode in the series I've watched before, but I haven't seen Secret of the Stars, The Mark of the Berserker, and The Temptation of the Sarah Jane Smith. So I've got them to look forward to, so that's really cool. So, on to the story at hand. So we basically get introduced to, well, the story starts off with basically Luke. He's getting this email from Maria. We actually get a voiceover by Yasmin Page, a really nice connection to her era previous on, where she's basically like, I'm enjoying it in America, I'm having fun, I'm making new friends, but I do miss you guys. And Sarah Jane can sense that Luke is feeling really down by this, and Sarah Jane is like, you know, Maria will always be with us. It's not like she's gone forever. We'll meet up again. And Luke's just like, yeah, but it's not going to be the same, is it? And Sarah Jane's like, yeah, I know, but you know, sometimes that could be for the best. You know, life is dependent on change. I mean, I used to know somebody who I used to know all the time, and now I only see him sparingly throughout the years. Obviously, talking about the Doctor. I mean, what else has she done to talk about? And so she basically relates to Luke, how friends not being a part of your life on a regular basis anymore could actually be a good thing. And I really like that scene. It really connects to Maria, and it's nice that she isn't just thrown away right off the bat. And there is like this growing pain for the character of Luke, and so we basically learn that somebody now has moved into Maria's old place with Rani and her parents. I can't remember Rani's last name. What is it? Chanlin? But I could be wrong. And so, well, they don't know at this point, but they know Sarah Jane meets up with the mother of the household, and Luke kind of puts into Sarah Jane's head, like, because Sarah Jane is like, right, you are not telling these people that we combat and fight and sometimes help aliens, okay? Because, you know, it's a dangerous environment that we live in, and part of the reason why Maria had such a rocky relationship with them is because, you know, she did get into all of these dangerous environments. That does beg the question, what happens to Clyde's family? Like, what does he think about the adventures that they go through? But that's not what this story is saying. But Clive does put into Sarah Jane's head that maybe they don't have a choice. Maybe Maria has left something alien in the house, and that will become like a sort of adventure later on. And Sarah Jane basically gets really concerned about this, and we get a great scene in which she basically goes in the house to investigate, but she acts like a loving new neighbour who wants to help out making food for the family, but only like the mother's there at the moment, and she's like packing everything out and stuff. So Sarah Jane is like in the house, and she's secretly scanning for alien technology, and the mother is basically like whimpering on in the background. And this also continues the running joke with Maria's mother, in which the mother character gets Sarah Jane's name wrong. There's a running joke here in which Sarah Jane is like, my name's Sarah Jane, but the mother only just calls her Sarah. And so Sarah Jane's just like, Sarah Jane, like whispering underneath her voice, and I found that really funny. Although I don't know how that really works, because the Doctor on numerous occasions have called Sarah Jane just simply Sarah, so strange. But you know, I do appreciate the running joke here. And so back in the school, Luke and Clive get introduced to Rani, who is this new girl who's invited, and she is a very curious individual. In fact, she wants to grow up to be a journalist, and when her mother hears that Sarah Jane is a freelance journalist, she is like, oh, my daughter wants to be a journalist as well. Maybe she can come to you and like freelance and help around and stuff and kind of take some pointers. But Sarah Jane is like, I can't really, my life is a bit too busy. The stuff that I deal with is a bit more private compared to most articles that most people write. So Sarah Jane tries to like push them out of their life, but Rani is essentially, reminds me anyway, like a really young Sarah Jane, in that she is just so curious about all of this stuff. It reminds me a lot of Sarah Jane in the story The Time Warrior, in which her curiosity is what usually gets her into the trouble, but also as well, she just can't help herself, which makes it a really nice contrast. Contrast. Maria herself was a lot curious as well, but there does seem to be a difference of curiosity where Maria, it's more like there's this like nagging feeling that something is wrong. Rani, it's like she just gotta know answers. She's just gotta know, even if it's like none of her business. She's gotta be curious, and I really like that. And I think this story is actually a great introduction to Rani, and I like how they make her feel such a different character to Maria, and that there's this joke that Clive might fancy Rani, and that Luke might have fancied Maria, and they kind of wind him up about it, but he's just like, I never fancied her, it's just a friend, I'm just going to miss her. Because, Luke has only known these handful of people through his entire life. Since he was born, he's known Maria. So that is kind of mental to think, to process. And you kind of do understand Luke's point of view, that even though he doesn't love her as in, like a relationship, he does miss Maria. And that's part of the growing of his character here, is that he's basically learning to make new friends with Rani. There's also a scene in which we get there's a school class and everybody's kind of like joking, misbehaving a bit. Not like, they're misbehaving as in like it's just not listening to the class, but, there's a bit of noise, there's a bit of disturbance in the class. And then we get introduced to the new headmaster, who we later learn is actually, spoiler warning I suppose, Rani's father. He's the new headmaster. I believe it's a reference to Revenge of the Slitheen, where the old headmaster disappeared, and so we've got this new headmaster. And whilst this is all going on, like him and Clive instantly don't get along, or at least Clive is basically, he's the joker of the class. That's his thing. He's much more interested in being charming or being quirky and being himself than actually learning anything and not disturbing anyone else. So instantly him and the new headmaster, Rani's father, instantly clash. And that does leave a great dynamic in the story, in which, of course, the adults don't listen to our kid characters of what the aliens and all that's going on. But because of Clive specifically, who does actually try and tell the headmaster what's going on to some degree, there's still that relationship dynamic there, and I really like that. However, I am a bit disappointed that we've gone back to the type of stories they would tell earlier on in Series 1, where it's literally only Sarah Jane, it's the only adult protagonist that knows about aliens and stuff. Like, one thing I really liked during the later half and the first episode of Series 2 is that Alan's got involved in the stories, which led to a much more adult cast of characters that know about aliens. In fact, double the fact, because you had one and now you had two. So I did myself. So I do hope, as far as I don't know if this actually does happen or not, but I do hope that Rani's family learns about aliens pretty quickly, at least at the end of the series, because I really I'm not a fan. I do understand the why the stories are structured like this. You gotta have this sort of status quo, but it was kind of getting pretty repetitive, and I hope we get out of that pretty quickly in the series. So fingers crossed for that. I can't actually remember if they do know in later stories, but as far as I'm concerned, they haven't, as far as I remember. So there's that, and I was kind of disappointed to get into, and I'm like, when that clicked in, it's like, oh yeah, the parents don't know. Although her father being the headmaster does leave a new interesting dynamic, where the father is a really strict character who is a lot more focused on getting Rani's grades and all that, and it also has a sort of important role to Clive and Luke. So that does leave an interesting dynamic interest there. But anyway, onto the actual plot itself. Characters, specifically Rani and Clive, start noticing that there is this individual wearing bright little clothes and seemingly holding a balloon, just quickly walking past. There seems to be this really strange entity going around. I forgot to mention that the pre-credit sequence of the first half is these kids playing football, and one of them gets into the forest, and then he sees this entity and then quickly gets kidnapped. And throughout the story we start hearing about these children all over the local area seemingly disappearing, and so and it seems to be connected with this clown. We later learn that there was a clown outside the school that was handing these tickets, and anyone who picked up these tickets forgot they picked up the tickets, and also started seeing this strange entity seemingly stalking them. And this is where Bragley Walsh comes in, and he kind of plays three different characters, but we will get into that later on. But I just want to state that Bragley Walsh's performance on playing these three sort of different characters, what an amazing performance. Like, you can kind of get the feeling that he is hammering up a bit because, you know, he's in a CBeebies program. Is it CBeebies? I can't remember now. I'm sure it's CBeebies, but it's a part, you know, it's a kids program. But you know, he does hammer it up a bit, but it's really just fun to watch. I love that shit-eating grin that he pulls to all the characters, where he's just like smiling, and he does this, leans his head forward at Sarah Jane and stuff. And so, yeah, and Sarah Jane basically learns about this and believes that there might be some sort of alien clown thing that's haunting and taking the children. And we basically learn that Sarah Jane actually has a phobia of clowns due to an event in her childhood where she had like this toy puppet clown, and it seemed to have moved in the shadows, and somehow that like image of her as a child has haunted her till the day until now. And so her part of her character is trying to grow through that. And what I really like about this story is through the first half, it's kind of just her learning to get over this pain, this haunting feeling, this phobia. And it's kind of treated as if like the things aren't really connected, like her fear of clowns, like, I mean, they're obviously connected to her, but in terms of the actual plot, there's nothing connecting them. It's just Sarah Jane is using like her fear to try and like, and the clown is kind of like using that fear of Sarah Jane, and so that's part of her character here, is that she has to grow through all these pains, and she tracks down Bragley Walsh's character she tracks down this missing children to a particular circus, because it says on this ticket. It's like seemingly this museum of old-fashioned circuitry, and she meets Bragley Walsh playing this different character, this kind of circus owner character, and this is one of when he like leans his head forward and is like spouting all of this like history of circuses and clowns and stuff. And Sarah Jane is getting this lesson, and I love how Bragley Walsh is his character, which I'm going to call Old Bill, because the clown persona is Old Bill the clown, Odd Bob the clown. And I love how he just isn't hiding the fact that he is like the villain. It's like, it's kind of like the mustache twirler. It's like, I'm clearly the villain. But Sarah Jane kind of realizes that, you know, this is the villain, and there's no animosity. Part of the story is not about Sarah Jane trying to work out that Bragley Walsh's Odd Bob character is part of it. Like, right off the bat, we learn that he is the clown, that he is this entity that actually, well, we don't learn this now, but we basically learn that he is the one that's kidnapping children. We don't know why, we don't know where this fear is coming from, but where this thing is coming from. But we know it wants to take the children, and we know that it's been here for thousands of years, and might have been the inspiration for the Pied Piper. In fact, one of the people it transforms to is actually an image of the Pied Piper and the clown, which has this old accent. It's got this real good, like Texas kind of thing going on. And I love for this, like this really quirky Braggley Walsh. I can't keep saying it, but Braggley Walsh here is a lot of fun to be around. And this actually leads into a cliffhanger where our characters basically all track down Sarah Jane to this museum, and they all get trapped whilst these seemingly robots, clowns, which I'm gonna have to say, massive criticism here, but it was so clearly it's just people with painted skin. Like there's a shot where Sarah Jane and Odd Bob are talking, and it like keeps cutting to all of these images of the statues of clowns, and it's so clearly that some of them are actually people. I thought the twist was going to be that Odd Bob takes these children and turns them into these puppet mannequins, but no, it seems to have like trapped them in this alternate dimension where they slowly seem to like fade away into the Pied Piper's dimension, and the cliffhanger is basically these robots and everything coming up, and Odd Bob revealing itself to be this massive clown creature and coming around to the children, seemingly taking them all. And pretty great cliffhanger. The resolution I think we need to talk about, because it also leads into a massive problem with the story. And I hate to say this, but it has to do with Michael Cranigan's directing, in that it's sometimes a bit too quick for its own good. Basically, the resolution is that we learn that signals, specifically signals that phones give off, basically distract the entity. It loosens the signal, and what that does is it not only does it stop it from connecting to all of these robots, but it also freezes it. And how it's portrayed on screen, what happened there? That was so poorly executed. It did kind of take me a while to realise just what the hell was going on. There's a bit of dialogue that basically explains what's going on, but I think it was so clearly that voiceover was added in. Basically, you hear Arnie's, it's like the phone, it's distracting him, the signals, it's made him unresponsive. But like I think it's so clearly trying to cover up a really poor editing and directing choice. Whether that was due to bad editing, or whether Cranigan just didn't have any time to film enough shots for this scene, and they needed to like make it pace really quickly, I have no idea. But it's sadly not the first, and sadly not the only time that this happens throughout the story. There are a few scenes where mainly the directing seems a bit quick. It seems a bit too not too well, but too fast, like trying to get to the next scene, sort of. And I feel like that is a problem with Michael Cranigan's directing here. It's too want to get to the point, if that makes any sense. So that is kind of a massive problem with the story in my opinion. But speaking of like how the story feels and stuff, something I did notice watching it is in the last story that we talked about, The Last Sontaran, I stated that there is a predator influence there, with the Sontaran turning itself invisible with an invisible effect in the forest. Here has a massive inspiration with It, the Stephen King novel, where you have a clown stalking children, and it turns out to be this evil, demonic entity that feeds off fear. So I don't know if that was purpose. I don't know if there's any more horror influences. As somebody whose favourite Doctor Who era is the Philip Hinchcliffe era, I was really happy to see that, and I hope that this horror-inspired Sarah Jane stories continues in a sense, because I feel like it makes these kind of stories more enjoyable for an adult viewing audience like myself, because I think that's one of the reasons why this story is praised so much. It's essentially Sarah Jane does it, and when you have that idea, I think a lot of people just on its own love that idea, because it in itself is a story about kids and how growing up in fear and all that. So it does really well work with the Sarah Jane adventures and having all of these characters learning and growing on all of their pains and anxieties. So anyway, Sarah Jane basically learns that Odd Bob is this secret entity that has been on Earth for 1,000 years in the Pied Piper, and it's been following this comet. This piece of comet that has been in space from billions and billions and billions and billions of years ago, and so she tracks down the comet, and it's been in Britain recently. In fact, it was taken up by the Pharos Institute, which previously appeared in the story The Lost Boy. And I don't know, but it might have a connection with the Pharos project in the story Logopolis. I'm not too sure. I will state, however, really funny, is that there's a bit where Sarah Jane is researching clowns, and she sees a picture of Clara the Clown from the Celestial Toy Maker. I don't know why, but that is really funny to me, because A, how the hell did they even get an image? She only existed in the Celestial Toy Room. She never actually entered real space, as far as we know. So Sarah Jane's computer must be really hardcore. And also, just like, why would you want a connection with the Celestial Toy Maker storyline? Like, that's the one where the N-word was used in classic series. Pretty funny stuff. And also, a lot of people just didn't like that story overall. I enjoyed it, but I know a lot of people didn't like that. So I do find it really funny that they made that classic, and a really nice Classic Who reference. I like how it does tie into the only other story which really deals with clowns in the Doctor Who mythos as far as we have known. Oh, there is actually, speaking of like similarities with it and stuff, there is a similarity here with the Torchwood episode from Out of the Rain, which deals with a very similar premise of an entity that is inspired by the circus and takes people into its other dimension. It's very similar in that regard. So I don't know where to add on to that. I don't know if this is connected to that story in some way, shape, or form. If they're supposed to be a similar species or anything. I don't know. But anyway, Sarah Jane goes to the Institute to get a comet. We basically learn Professor, I believe her name is Professor River, makes a return from the Lost Boy, and she basically is like, thank you, Sarah Jane, for your help for the last time we had an issue. You can have whatever you want, just, we hope that none of this gets in the press. And Sarah Jane is just like, don't worry, I'm here to actually stop any of this from getting from the press. And in fact, you can actually help me save the world in some regard. And so she needs to get a piece of this meteor to try and help capture the entity in some way, shape, or form. Which I just realised, actually, yeah, no, I tell a lie, it does actually help with the conclusion of the story. But Sarah Jane takes a peek to this meteorite, but actually, Odd Bob is actually there. He appears in front of Sarah Jane, and Sarah Jane has this like fear. She starts shaking in a set, and she's like, "I'm not afraid of you," and she's kind of like improving. She's kind of getting up and standing up for herself. It's like, no, I'm not afraid of clowns anymore. I am grown up. I am mature. And then we get a sort of twist, which I don't know how, I imagine it's not a very popular twist, but I absolutely love it, personally. I think in any other situation I wouldn't like this twist, but I really like it here. And it turns out, either Odd Bob knows about the experience that Sarah Jane had all those years ago, or it was Odd Bob's doing that. It was him making the puppet in Sarah Jane's old house move, and he basically has been feeding off Sarah Jane's fear of that for all this time, and Sarah Jane is like, how can you even know that? That just like really makes you like go, okay, Sarah Jane's fear is kind of like, there is some basis there, but it's, you know, it's still like a child fear, and it's something that she can easily grow out of, and it's a bit like a fear of spiders. You know, it's not that big a deal really, but it is important to the character. And then this twist happens, and you're like, oh Christ! Now she actually, her fears were genuinely justified, and that means now Sarah Jane's storyline of her conquering her fears becomes a lot more engaging, in my opinion. And so Phil Ford rates a fantastic piece of character here, and I love how the character beats here are very small but very poignant scenes here and there throughout the story, and I like how each character here gets something to do and say, with each four of our main protagonists each having something to say and something to grow out through the story. It's probably one of the best executed in terms of each character having their own character traits to conquer throughout the story. And I think that's another reason why this story is so popular, because Clive is basically the Joker character who he's basically learned to not the Joker character, but he's trying to like calm down. He is trying to calm down and relax. Sorry, my phone went off there. And you have Luke basically learning from Maria. We've got Rani basically learning about all these monsters and stuff, but also learning to try and keep it to herself. And we also have Sarah Jane and her fears of clowns. So right off the bat, we got like this really interesting dynamic. And each time the story goes to a different character, it doesn't break the pacing of the narrative. So I really enjoy that. And this all leads into this finale in which Odd Bob seems to control anybody who's holding this particular balloon, and that he basically plans to do this mass kidnapping, which will just terrify parents all over Britain, and this will create as much fear as possible to so that he can feed off almost forever, because this is an entity. It seems to be a almost demonic entity that feeds off fear. I like how Mr. Smith basically explains that he's from a particular area of space where just creatures that feed off emotional energy just exist. Like, it's just a culture in another part of the universe. It's normal in one part of the universe. I do actually kind of like that explanation. It keeps it still mysterious, but also as well has this kind of grounded persona with him, and not like he's actually the devil or something. But that's just my opinion. And Sarah Jane basically connects Mr. Smith to all these phones, which will block Odd Bob into and stops these kids from being kidnapped. But Odd Bob decides to take one child, Luke, and that really puts Sarah Jane in this like, holy Christ, because, you know, she is now this epicenter of fear, because, you know, her son has been taken away and might not be seen forever. And so she basically goes after Odd Bob by herself, trying to tell the kids, like, no, you stay here, you cannot get involved, it is way too dangerous, you could be kidnapped as well. And I like how Clive basically puts together, so right, if this is a fear of entity of fear, laughter will be its like poison. In fact, it fears laughter. And so we get this really charming, also as well kind of silly ending in which Clive basically uses his clownish persona, the clown of the class persona, to tell all of these silly, stupid jokes, showing that he is not afraid of the Pied Piper in any way, shape or form. And Sarah Jane kind of works out what's going on. And so she basically comes along and she uses the stone with some sort of alien technology to trap Odd Bob in this prism for basically the rest of his life, and hopefully never to be hunting humans again. And once this happens, it frees all the. It says it frees all the kids recently, all the ones that he kidnapped recently in recent memories when he entered Britain recently, when the comet came to Britain recently. All of the kids are freed. But it does beg the question: what happened to all the kids, like, for the hundreds of years that he's been stealing people? Did they come back? Did they come back as kids? What happens there? What happened to them? Curious. I want to know answers on that. It seems like they didn't return, which does kind of mean that Sarah Jane has just left these kids for all eternity in this feared dimension. So that's pretty messed up. And the story then ends with not Maria, I keep calling her Maria. I got so used to Maria, but Ronnie, basically like having this talk with Sarah Jane, and Sarah Jane is just like, you can't tell your parents at all. And the parents then are just like, come on, we're going to celebrate moving into this new house. We're all going to have like a buffet in my house, and Luke and Clive go in, and I like Clive's reaction is just like, I got the headmaster making food for me. This is like the best day of my life. I love that reaction. So that's Day of the Clown. Overall, it's really good. There's a lot of things to like about it. But I don't think it's as good as people make it out to be. I don't think it's as scary as I hoped it would be. Maybe that's more me going into this. I feel like Michael Cranagan's directing was really weak at most parts, and at worst comprehensive mess, and was very hard to get into the story by the way the story is portrayed in a visual medium. It's kind of bland looking for the most part, and in one or two, let's say 4 or 5 scenes, the directing is just wants to get quickly to the next point, which is really bizarre. I don't think it's anything written. I genuinely believe it was the directing that was at fault here, from what I can gather. But I don't want to like Cranigan be like, how dare you? You know, creating television is a very complicated job to do. So I don't know who's at fault there, but to me it feels like Cranigan's work. But there's still a lot to like here. Each character is got a very great story and character patterns to keep their character interesting throughout the rest of the story. Phil Ford's writing is brilliant, and Bradley Walsh does a fantastic job at making this very villainous impression. And also Angeline Mahindra's performance as Rani, the Rani's the evil time lady. But Rani is a great character, and this is a great introduction to her character. So there's a lot to like here. I just wish it was a little bit better. So anyway, that is The Day of the Clown. So join me next time for a story which I haven't seen and I actually know 0 things about. I don't, even from the trailer, I can't even get an impression of what the story is about. So it could be a complete mess, or it could be something really interesting. So join me next time for Secret of the Stars, and I'll see you next time on the Doctor Who Marathon. Ta-ra!